What's up guys, it's me Lego Paradise here, and today I'm going to show you the start of my Lego Motorized racetrack. This is a first episode in a brand new series where I'll be showing you guys how I build my biggest Lego creations from start to finish. This means that you guys will get to see some behind the scenes construction and watch how my projects progress from the start all the way to a finished creation. So I'm really excited that I'm now able to do these work in progress types of videos, since I've got this really great new background for my bigger Lego creations, and I think this will be a really fun series to see my projects evolve into the finished product. And my current project is my motorized Lego racetrack. And as you saw in the intro, this is not just any Lego racetrack, but it's actually quite special, because I've managed to get some moving features and actually have the cars drive around the track using a very special mechanism, and I'll show you that in just a bit. This is all a work in progress, so anything you see at the moment might change, and some of it will most likely definitely change before the final version of this creation. But that's part of the fun and part of the process. I think the most interesting part, and definitely the most clever part of this build, is the mechanism for moving the cars around the track. And I'm really happy with how this turned out, because I thought this is always something that would be really cool to have. A little road, or maybe a city, or in this case a racetrack made out of Lego, where the cars are actually able to drive around and follow a route around the roads that you create. So I've been trying to get this effect working for quite a long time now, and I started with some really basic prototypes. But the basic idea of this is that the cars move using magnets. So you have a magnet attached to the car and a magnet underneath the track, and that goes around on a conveyor system. So let's take a look at how that works. So first, if we take a look at one of these cars that I've made, you can see it sticks to the track because there's a magnet right underneath this road base plate. And you can also see there's a Lego magnet underneath the car. This is just one of the magnets taken from the Lego train system. But I'll explain some more about the cars in just a bit. So if we just unclip these bricks, they're just to hold all of the road plates together and make sure that the car doesn't hit any bumps as it's going around the track. And we remove this base plate. You can see that under the base of the entire racetrack is this conveyor belt. And you can see that there's another magnet hidden away in that transparent green brick. And I just use that transparent green 1x4 brick just because it has nothing in the middle of the brick. So unlike a regular 1x4, you can actually fit stuff in it. And in this case, it's another magnet. And this is one of the only non-Lego elements, in fact the only non-Lego piece in this entire mechanism. But basically, that's just because I needed a magnet that's just a little bit more powerful, that can actually pull the car through the thickness of one of these road plates. And these Lego road base plates work really well because they are quite thin, and you can see how much force the car is attaching to this magnet right now. It's quite well stuck on there. You can see it lifts up the conveyor belt quite a bit, and luckily this force also works through a Lego road plate. So you can see that's how I've got the car to stick to the conveyor belt underneath, and that will come off with a bit of wobbling, but it's actually pretty strong connection for the distance that the magnet is and the power of the magnet. So you can see that the conveyor belt actually goes around the entire shape of the racetrack, and this is a bit more obvious to see if we just take off one of the corners, and I'll show you the entire bases removed in just a little bit. But first you can see how this integrates with the rest of the road on top. So you can see that the magnets go around the corners, and that's how you get the effect of the cars being pulled round as they're going across the conveyor belt on the top of the road. And I think that works really well, and I'm definitely really happy with how that's turned out. And then the way that the conveyor belt actually goes round is it's powered by a power functions motor. And that is actually on the other side of the racetrack. So let's take off a few of these base plates so you can see the whole mechanism in detail. Okay, so now with the base plates removed, you can see the entire mechanism a bit better. So you can see exactly how this conveyor belt goes along the entire space underneath the track. And on this side, this is where the power functions motor is that actually powers the conveyor belt system and makes all of these magnets and cars spin around the track. So you can see that this is almost identical on both sides, but obviously this side has the motor, and that is actually quite well hidden away inside this little compartment, but that's just for strength and to reinforce it a bit. So you can see how the conveyor belt is attached, and it uses one of those big Technic gear pieces, the one in yellow there. The way that it actually works is the conveyor belt obviously doesn't follow the exact shape of the road, since the road is more of a smoother curve and here it's more of an angular one. But that's just because the conveyor belt needs to be a bit loose so it can move around, but also not too loose that there's no tension in the belt and the actual magnets would go all everywhere and wouldn't actually always be on the track. So it's important to get the right balance with that. And just to help guide this conveyor belt around the corners, I've taken some inspiration from some of the rides at theme parks and how they use real-life tyres to guide other conveyor belts and the rides around their theme parks. I'm sure you've seen some of these if you ever looked at some of the mechanisms of some rides like those water rides, or maybe even a few roller coasters. I'm sure they use the same sort of idea. So the reason I went with a power functions motor is I did try a mechanism for this system using a Mindstorms motor. I'll just get a prototype so you can see. But the problem that I found with using a Mindstorms motor was that it just wasn't powerful enough to actually pull the conveyor belt around, because you don't realise how much force you need to pull all of these magnets around when they're actually gripping the cars to the track. Because it's like two forces acting on the base plate in the middle. And this Mindstorms motor just wasn't powerful enough. And that's a bit of a shame because I wanted to include some other Mindstorms features into the racetrack. For example, one of the ideas I had was I could do it so using the Mindstorms colour sensor, I could have a system where there's different coloured flags in the race and a minifigure could be standing somewhere in front of the sensor holding, say, a red flag, and the track would stop moving. So all the cars around the track would come to a stop, because that's the sort of stuff you can program depending on the colour. Well, if you changed it to a green light, the cars would start going again, or maybe like a yellow light, say there's been like an accident on the track, then you could reduce it so the speed is slower, and you could have it sort of almost automated like that. And I'm sure there's a few other things I could have thought of with the Mindstorms motors, but unfortunately, because they're just simply not powerful enough, at least just using one motor, then I was not able to do that. But I still think it's a super cool effect, even with just the power functions where you just switch it on and off and the cars go around the track. Since this is really not a technique that you see other people use that often in LEGO creations. I've only really seen other people use this for things like creating a go-kart track, or even some minifigures ice skating underneath a little base which also had some magnets going around on a similar conveyor belt system. But I haven't seen anyone make a full-scale racetrack out of this, which is why I'm really excited to be working on this project. And it's also pretty great that you guys can see it from the very start as well. But of course, I'll still have a think and see if I can go back to designing this system, since while it's pretty good, while it's pretty reliable, I think it can still be improved, and it can still work a bit more consistently, because even now sometimes you get a few gaps and bumps in a track and the cars sometimes come off. But that's just something that needs to be worked on, and I think I can figure it out and make it even better than it already is. And then just before I put all of the road base plates back on top of the base, I might as well talk about the actual base itself. And for this, I've just been using a bunch of white bricks and as well some beige bricks on the sides. And it's nothing too complicated, but I still think it's pretty cool to have a nice big raised base for the Lego creation. And also you kind of need it with a mechanism like this, like I have for the Motorized Lego racetrack. And as well, you can also see the switch to turn the track on and off. If you turn that on, you can see the conveyor belt starts going around, and you can get a good idea of how this actually pulls the cars around. So of course the switch is going to be moved on later on. It's not going to be there in just sticking out of the side of one of these walls. I'll try and find a bit of a better place for it, or at least make it look a bit nicer. But for now it does the job, and it's really great for testing. So you can see that's the battery box that connects to the power functions motor. And you can just switch that off, and you'll see how it's pretty responsive. And it allows you to go forward or back. So obviously you can change the direction of the race depending on whatever way you want the cars to drive around. So let's get the track back, and I'll talk a little bit about the cars. Okay, so now let's get to the next most important part of any racetrack, and that is the cars themselves. So I had quite a long think about which cars would look the best going around my motorized Lego racetrack. And I thought some of the most interesting designs and coolest colour schemes were of some classic Le Mans cars. And these range from the late 60s all the way to the late 80s. But either way, I think each of these cars that are based on the real life versions has a really cool and unique design feature that I think I've incorporated really well into Lego. And of course, none of these cars are actually completely finished yet. There's some of them with some parts quite obviously still need to be built, or I need to find the right colour pieces, but you can see the start that I've made on each of these designs. My plan is eventually to have all 4 of these cars driving around the entire racetrack and racing each other on the circuit. I think that'll be really awesome when I get that all working. But for now, you can see that each of these cars in order is a Porsche 956, and this is one of the older cars that I'll be racing around this track. And you can see these are all inspired by actually the Lego Speed Champions Porsche 917. This is not the official Lego design. I have modified the one that you get in the set a bit, just so it's a little bit lower. And I've changed a few parts which I think are for the better. But one thing I still need to make on the Porsche 917 is fill in the bit at the back and just find a few other pieces in the right colours. Since I haven't actually got the original set, I've just ordered the few specialised pieces that make up the actual car. But one major change that I've made is with the front of the car, and you can see that that's the air intake, the grille, and underneath that is of course the Lego train magnet that I use to pull the car around the track. And all of these cars will have a similar magnet underneath them. You can see this Jaguar also has a magnet like that, but I still need to do some work with this one to make sure it doesn't keep spinning around and changing the magnetism and the magnetic direction of that magnet. And something quite interesting already is that originally when I was designing this motorized track system, I was going to use not the Lego train magnets that you get from the train buffer pieces, which I'm now using, but instead I was going to actually go with the magnets from some Lego magnet minifigures. And this is actually from a Lego Star Wars magnet set, one of the old ones back when the minifigures weren't actually glued to the magnets. And they also work, if we just turn one of these cars over, you can see these are also magnetic pieces. This one's in fact the wrong way around, so it's pushing that magnet away. But basically I was going to use 2 of these magnets in the bottom of these cars, because that's what I thought of using originally, although it turned out I did need a slightly more powerful magnet. So you can see one of the original design cars, and this one is another Jaguar, and this is how I was originally going to have the magnets. So you have 2 of these side by side. But obviously that takes up quite a lot of space, and like I said, it's just not strong enough to pull the cars around the track. Although it does sort of work. But I think that the newest change is for the better. So then, as we continue along the cars, next we get to the Jaguar XJR6, and this is another quite old Le Mans car. And it's pretty similar to some of the others, very low, obviously without the magnet. And I think it's a really nice colour scheme. And I'm also thinking of adding some stickers and maybe some decals to them, just to make them look a bit more realistic, to have like their sponsors and logos and advertising on them. And then finally here is another really quite interesting one. This is a Jaguar XJR12. And this one actually has a cover on the back wheels. And this is just like in real life, you can't actually see most of the rear wheels, and that's because they're hidden. Even though in the real life version, the wheels would be pretty much similar, same ones to the front wheels. In my Lego version, I've sort of cheated a little bit and just used some of these trolley wheels. But that's just to get it to go around the track a bit nicer, and so it's a bit easier to corner. Although, of course, since I'm going to redesign this car to get rid of these magnets and instead use the new updated train magnet system, then I might do something about the back wheels and just use some more of these wheels and just maybe make them so they go in a bit more. I think that'd be quite cool. And one thing I really like about this Jaguar XJR12 in Lego form, as well as the back bit obviously, is the spoiler at the back. I think I've done that really quite well. So that's pretty cool, and I think that once I get all of these cars finished and actually completed with no wrong colour pieces, they'll look really good going around the racetrack. And that brings us to the last part of this episode, which is the actual racetrack itself. Obviously this is as well going to have lots more features, lots more buildings all around the track. But you can see I've already made a start on some of the buildings, like the grandstands and a Dunlop bridge that I've added just in the entrance to what's going to be the pit stops. Before I just show you those, overview of what I plan on having here is around the front area, around the studded areas of the actual road base plates. I'm thinking about having some nice green grass, low hills, and of course some red and white stripes on the corners. Maybe some sandbanks. I think that'd look pretty cool and add a bit more to the realism. And that can continue in the middle section, although I might put some other things like some camera crews filming that action on the track, and some other spectators and that sort of thing as well. And then as we get to the middle, this is where it's going to start to be a bit more built up. You have the grandstands over here, and the entrance to the pit stops and the pit lanes in just off here where the bridge is. And then this section here is going to be where the control tower is that overlooks the entire racetrack. And I think that's going to be really cool. That's going to be the tallest point of the build and provide a good overview of the track. And then in the base plates at the back, this is where the pit stop is going to be. So my idea is that this lane here will be used as the sort of pit lane, so the cars can drive all the way along this. And of course it will only be one way, but that's because I am a bit limited for space, since you don't realise how many bricks building such a huge base like this actually takes up until you build one. But basically this road will go all the way out to the end, and this is going to be where the actual entrance is to the racetrack. And I think that works really well. We can see how I've already removed a section of the wall, so you can imagine how this would connect up to a road if I was to expand on this layout. So of course you have the pit lane there, and then the actual garages will go along here, so you have a garage for each of the cars along here. There'll be quite a long building going all the way up until this base plate, and then here is where I'm planning on having a sort of gift shop and maybe a restaurant area on top, and that can probably connect to the grandstands up on here. So the grandstands I have actually started, and I'm very happy with how this design is turning out. So the actual seats, I've got them to follow the curved shape of the track, and that's just made using lots of hinge pieces that are actually just balancing the grandstands on the road base plates on some tiles, so they're not actually collected in the bits in the middle. These grandstands are simply only joined to the track on the bit on the corner sections on the end, but it's still nice and secure, and you can see it doesn't move about too much, and I think with lots of minifigures it will really enhance it. And then another cool feature which is not yet finished is this cool fence design. So I came up with this mesh fence design by using a Lego fireman net that's from one of the old fire station sets, and I think that looks really cool. It's a really good contrast to the red seats, and I think that would be a good pattern if I can order some more of those net pieces and have them go around all of the outside of the grandstand. And I might even alternate the colour of these fences, but that just depends on which colour fences I can buy on somewhere like Bricklink, and I might just keep them all the same colour and just have the flags on top different colour. I think that'd probably look better. So then you can see on this next base plate the grandstand continues, and I'm also quite happy with this bridge design which I've managed to build into the grandstand, because you'll notice that each of these base plates is entirely separate. You can remove each of them, and it doesn't actually need to disconnect any of the other parts of the track. So that's nice and convenient for accessing the mechanism below. And of course you have this big bridge. This will be where the starting lights go up on that gantry that I've just included underneath. I'm gonna maybe see if I can even get some actual real life LED lights. I think that'd look really cool. Maybe even some more general lighting for the whole track, so you can have some night races. That's a good idea. And then you can also see the access that this bridge provides to the centre, because obviously this would be easy to access when the race is not going on, but during the cars, when the cars are racing around the track, you won't just be able to walk out from the grandstands into the centre. So this is where you'd have to take the bridge, and you can see there's just enough space for a minifigure to crawl across the walkway and climb down the ladder on either side. You can see there's one connecting it to the grandstand at the back there. And again, to vary up, this is where the starting marshal waving the flag will stand, in this little raised platform that you can access with a small ladder. I think that's also turned out pretty good, and I've made it so it's also a bit overlooking the track, just so the drivers have it a bit easier to see the flags and when to start. And then as we get to this bit, this is a classic Dunlop bridge. I'm sure if you've ever been to one of the more famous race circuits, especially in Europe, you might have come across one of these style bridges. And this is, of course, made by the famous tyre company, and it's designed to look like half a tyre stuck in the ground. And I think I've done a pretty good recreation with my Lego version. I realise that in real life, these tyre bridges, usually go over the top of the racetrack, and not as an entrance to the pit lane. But I'm quite happy with how it looks being the entrance to the pit stops, and I think it just fills in the space between these two sections quite nicely. Okay, so that concludes the start of my LEGO Motorized racetrack, and the next episode will be out when I feel that I've made some more significant progress on the project. Until then, you can expect to see some more of my usual types of videos, and don't forget to let me know in the comments what you think of this new work in progress style of videos for my big creations. I'll see you guys next time with some more videos, and thanks for watching.